Okay. In this lecture, we are keenly interested to explore that how Islam is thinking about the welfare of the society, uh, and we will be spending more time that what are the mechanisms Islam has devised for us, or Islam has kept for us for the purpose of ensuring social welfare. So you are probably aware of the fiscal policy, which is a government policy with regard to government revenue and government expenditures. So a number of people and all the policymakers have a keen interest that what is the direction of the fiscal policy, what will be the government expenditure and what will be the government revenue. And there are some school or there are some parties who have certain views that on the what will be the direction of the government expenditure and the government revenue. You probably have heard about these views, the capitalist views. You have probably have heard about the socialist views or communist views, and you also have you're very much familiar. So here you see that capitalist policymakers or capitalist party want to make sure that government spends less for the people and favor the people who earn more capital. And they also want to make the tax burden, make the tax burden less for the people who earn more. It's not kind of they do not want their income to be taxed. They look for it, but they do not like that government provides all types of benefits to the underprivileged people by taking tax from the rich people. They do not like this capitalist. And the socialist people, what they do, they favor the view that government spends more for the greater benefit of society by taking or by imposing higher taxes on the people who earn more income. So in between, there is another party which is known as conservative or populist party, and they want as minimum possible the involvement of the government in an economy by making less expenditure. And they want that private people will make expenditures for themselves. People will earn their income for themselves. So you see a number of differences are exist among these groups and or among these parties. And the views what I just have shared with you, you see that no party take reference from the Islam and or other religion to give a support to their claim. So generally, they provide no reference from the religious teaching. So they also do not like the involvement of the people in the policy making. They do not like the people, I mean, which people? The people who know the religion much, who know the religion more. They do not like the religious people get involved in the policy making. I mean, the politicians do not like this. So what are the reasons? The reason is that there are debates among the religious people that which one is right and which one is not right. And the thing is common in Western countries, that thing is also common in the Muslim countries. And what is the practice? Politicians do not like the faithful people or the religious people. But you see some form of parties or some form of groups, which are kind of religious groups or religious parties, and they participate in the election, and they also try to get involved in the policy making, and they try to bring some religious influences or religious teaching in the policy making. So, but it has been found that these people who are a religious group or who are religious party and want to participate in the politics, they are not as successful as expected. Successful for what? They are not, they have not become much successful to implement the religious teaching they have learned from the religion. So what is the reason? Because they have some that they have some groupings or they have different views themselves. I mean, the religious parties are not uniform in their views. They also have differences in their beliefs. So for that reason, they are not strong. They do not have the dominant influence. So what they cannot do, they cannot bring some preferential advantages for the institutions which follow the Sharia. So you do not see, it is not usually the practice, the Sharia compliant banks get more privileges compared to the conventional banks, or Sharia compliant funds get more advantages from the government or regulator for complying with the Sharia relative to the conventional funds. So the political parties, I mean the which are influenced by the religions, they couldn't bring good changes, or they couldn't make it, they couldn't bring a good changes, or they couldn't bring implementation of the religion in the policy making. So that's why we see that distribution of wealth has a discrimination. You see the discrimination is going up. The top richest people have a significant amount of wealth, and the people who are in the bottom, they have a very least amount of wealth in under their possession. So economic policies are nowadays, policymakers want to make sure that economic policies are designed in a way that will ensure more equity and more equitable distribution of wealth, so that the discrimination will go down and welfare of the society will be maximized. So you know that equity or equitable distribution is not same as equal distribution of wealth. So the reason is that Creator has given varying amount of resources to the people, to his creature. So rich people have more wealth, or the people who have more knowledge, they are likely to have more wealth. And people who do not have more knowledge, or who do not have good amount of technological expertise, they do not have a good amount of wealth. And why it happens? Because the people who are more knowledgeable, they can take care of greater amount of resources. But the person who does not have such knowledge, such plenty of knowledge, he or she does not have the capacity to take care of a greater amount of resources. So equal distribution is not like that you make, say, an economy has 1,000 taka, and there are 10 people in the economy, and you give 100 to each individual. So in that case, the person who is more knowledgeable and who is less knowledgeable, they will have equal amount of wealth, but you will see that the person who is less knowledgeable, he is not able to take care of the 100 amount of wealth to that extent, because he does not have that amount of knowledge which is necessary to take care of the wealth. So our purpose is to make sure that there is an equitable distribution of wealth. And for these purposes, we see the application of taxes. We see that the application of taxes in different countries, and apparently there is no country which does not impose taxes on the people. And one of the purposes of imposing taxes is to make sure that equitable distribution of wealth will be ensured. So in Muslim societies, there were a practice of some major forms of taxes. You probably have heard about the Kharaj taxes, which is an idea of imposing taxes on land based on the yield or crops to be generated by the land. You will have to pay taxes. And there is a tax which is known as jizya or head tax. So jizya tax was a kind of tax which is a controversy. The controversy arises because of the reason that jizya was imposed equally. So if there is a society, that society needs some lighting on the road, and in that society which will be using this road, there is a living of 10 families, and 10 families will pay equal amount of taxes to the government. That was in practice of jizya. But matter is that why there is a controversy, because regardless of the rich level or regardless of the wealth level, all are paying equal amount of taxes. But there are some exceptions, the people who are women, especially who are widowed, or the children, I mean the family is dominated by children, and they are very much poor. They are some extent exempted from paying jizya taxes. And there was another taxes which was known as a tax on the booties of war, and that was known as phi tax. And it is nowadays controversial. It is a kind of taking out the property of the opponent during the war. I mean, after winning in a war, the winning party will take the ornaments or valuable things from the opponent party, And that was this practice. And finally, the Zakat. So Zakat is a form of wealth taxes which is imposed on wealth other than income, other than any specific land or this kind of thing, what we just have discussed. So in this lecture, we'll be spending time to know about the Zakat and what is the role of Zakat and when Zakat is applicable to an individual. And from the background discussion, you already have learned what is the purpose of the Zakat. Obviously, Zakat has been introduced for the purpose of ensuring equitable distribution of wealth. And we will spend some time to know about the Waqf, and that is also for the same purpose to make sure that some people who need the charity, they will be getting benefit in the form of Waqf. And Islamic Microfinance, I believe you are familiar with the microfinance concept in the conventional financial market. Though this is not a part of a full financial market, rather it is a kind of semi-formal financial market institution, I mean the microfinance. And what is the idea of Islamic microfinance and what is about concessional finance, and what kind of taxation policies government has to take to promote the social justice, and which areas government should be prioritized for spending, and what are the international development assistance providing organizations which provide assistance to the countries and who are promoting the Islamic finance. And these are the some contents we will be trying to cover in this lecture. Okay. So first of all, Zakat, and I believe many of you are familiar with the concept of Zakat, but we have limited knowledge, or sometimes we do not have the appropriate knowledge to about the Zakat, and we see that the same thing happens in our family, in our society. Okay, so Zakat is a kind of integral part of the Islam, and do not forget the purpose of the Zakat, and do not forget the background discussion we made. So Zakat is not a kind of separate thing here. Though the purpose of the Zakat is to make the equitable distribution of wealth in the society and make sure that there is no person who is living in hunger or who is not getting the basic necessities. Rather, all are getting their basic necessities fulfilled. So one of the ways other than the conventional mechanism what government tries is Zakat. So from the religious perspective, Zakat is an integral part of the Islam, and it has been prioritized after Tawheed and the Salat. After Tawheed and the Salat, Zakat is the third most important pillar in the Islam, and Saum and Hajj will come after Zakat. So in terms of the priority, given in the sources of Sharia. So I believe you have not forgot the sources of Sharia we mentioned in the preliminary or very first classes. Okay. So for the purpose of purification of wealth, Zakat has been made mandatory. So what is the purification of wealth? It is not a kind of the thing that it has by default, assuming that all people have impure wealth. So people tries to, I mean, the people who follows the Islam or who are the faithful people, that try to earn wealth or accumulate wealth in a way which is a purified form. They try. So the word is try, but the world is crowded with so many impure practices. So though you are trying to generate wealth in the form of compliant way, some portion of your wealth, some portion of your income which is accumulating in the wealth uh, can come from impure sources, can come from impure sources. So always we do not have the clear idea that how my wealth has become impure. But if you think each and every step through which you are accumulating wealth, you will see that in a particular step there is some confusion. That's why the outcome which is coming in the form of wealth, that is likely to be a small percentage that is part of impure. So for the purpose of purifying our wealth, the zakat has been made mandatory. So zakat is not a kind of choice. This is an important thing we need to recognize first. Zakat is not a part of voluntary choice. It's a kind of mandatory responsibility. Okay, charity is a voluntary. So do not think zakat is a kind of charity we are making. Okay, but it serves the same purpose. But zakat is not a charity, because charity is a kind of voluntary spending of money or voluntarily giving out money to the underprivileged people. So zakat is a kind of mandatory. Okay, so when zakat will be mandatory for which individual? So there is a concept that is nisab. Okay, so what is the nisab? So some people, okay, let me make it clear first, then I will try to share that what is the belief of common people. So the practice is that, or the rule is that, if you have a wealth of 7.5 Vori, and if you try to convert it into the grams, 11.6, if I'm not wrong, that par 4 is equal to 11.6 or 56 grams. You see that amount is something 77 or something plus. Okay, or you can convert, you can take it another from 52 tola silver and Vori gold. So say we have 7.5. So I'm not taking the number in the gram. Let me take it in the bhori or tola. But you know that how to convert it into the grams. Okay. So do you have the idea what is the gold price right now per bhori? Approximate amount? You are there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So we can see 47. It depends on like
The carat.
22 karat 10 grams.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It's more than 47,000 BDT.
47,000.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So what I'm doing, I'm taking a number. So I'm taking that par bhori is equal to 60,000. Okay. So obviously there will be some follow-up questions that which kind of gold it is. Is it 18 karat or is it 22 or 24 karat? So let me take it as standard form, that form which is used commonly. So 7.5 into 60,000. So the usual practice is that do not take the actual market value, subtract 20% from the market value. 20% discount is as a charge of replacement. So if you have your gold and you want to cash it out, you have to accept a discount. So that is discount is close to 20% or 15%, this kind of percentage. So 7.5, 60,000, that will be something amount. So is it 450,000? I'm assuming that this 60,000 is after discount. Is it 450,000?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it is 450,000. And what is the way that you have the nisab? The nisab is that gold here is a kind of just for approximation. So say I have 1 million amount of wealth, on which Zakat will be applicable. I will explain that which assets will be subject to Zakat or on which asset Zakat will not be applicable. Let's assume that the applicable wealth amounts to 1 million taka. Okay. So you see that this is a form of nisab. So if your wealth level exceeds the minimum threshold level, and minimum, you see that nisab is equal to threshold. These are the same thing. So you see your 1 million taka wealth, when you convert it into the money or when you calculate it in the monetary value, this amount exceeds the nisab amount. And another condition is that this amount of 1 million taka, which I am taking, 1 million taka amount of wealth was with you at least for previous 1 year. At least for previous 1 year. In that case, Zakat is mandatory for you. Okay. Note that why gold has been taken here, or equivalently you can compare it, you can calculate another value if you take the silver. Now you see that people misunderstand that if I have only gold or if I have only silver, in that case, Zakat will be applicable for me, otherwise not. That is the wrong concept. Okay. So gold, silver, this valuable metals have been taken just to calculate the value of nisab be applicable on a certain point of time. So say I have a agricultural land on which I get agriculture which will be sold in market. So that agricultural land is a kind of for my business. So Zakat will be applicable on that. So if I assume that agricultural land has a value of 1 million taka and I have no other wealth. Let's assume I have no other wealth on which Zakat will be applicable. In that case, I have to pay Zakat. Now the question is how much I should pay. The answer is this is a flat rate. Flat on what? Flat on the amount of wealth level, that is the 2.5%. Flat rate on the amount of wealth when it exceeds nisab level. When it exceeds nisab level. Okay. There is another misconception. Another misconception is that we will pay Zakat only if my wealth exceeds nisab, and I will pay Zakat on the balance amount. So what is the balance amount here? 550,000. The answer is wrong. I have to pay Zakat on this multiplied by 2.5%. How much it is? On 10 lakh or 1 million wealth, 2.5%, how much it is? Only 25,000?
Right, sir. 25,000.
Is it too much? What do you think? Is it too much
Sir,
relative
as
to your wealth level of 1 million taka?
sir, should not be. It should not be too much.
Okay, it depends. It depends based on the perception. Okay. So whether it is too much or it is too low, it is too much or it is too low in your perspective or in your sense does not matter to Islam. You have to pay 2.5%. No one can claim that I am very well off. I would like to pay 5% Zakat. The answer is wrong. One cannot say, I do not have any cash, I will pay 0.5%. The answer is wrong. You cannot do that. Government is trying to say that 0.5% rate was calculated based on the verdict or based on the justification given in 1400 years ago. Now we are thinking that 3% is justified given the changes in the current world and the current condition of the world? The answer is this kind of changing the rate is not permissible. Have you got it? Have you got it? What I
Yes, sir.
mean? Okay, you cannot change it. You cannot change it now. So you are a very rich person. On your wealth, instead of paying 2.5%, you have paid 5%. So what amount will be considered as zakat? 2.5% will be considered as zakat, and remaining 2.5% what you have paid will be considered as charity. Am I clear? So 2.5%, which is a part of zakat, is a kind of mandatory, and 2.5% what you have additional, it is a kind of voluntary. Okay, so you mentioned that it is not too much. It is not too much. So you do not.
Sir.
Yeah.
But in this case, what will be the actual percentage of zakat? Because we practice 2.5%.
Yeah.
In our Islam in our country, but according to your lecture, we came to know that it is 0.5%. 0.5%. Then it is then there is a gap between 2.5% and 0.5%. So, which percentage we should follow according to Islam?
2.5%.
But in our country, we are practicing 2.5%.
Yeah. It is only 2.5%. Zakat is equal to 2.5%. Zakat rate is equal to 2.5%. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Or out of your 1,000 taka zakat applicable wealth, you have to pay 40 taka. Same to same. Okay. Okay. So there are some verses in the Quran. You will see if you have the opportunity that this small percentage what the Creator has made mandatory for us was perceived as very high to the Emperor Karun, if I'm not wrong, during the time of Musa, alayhi salam. So he considered it, the zakat percentage or zakat rate too much, and he ignored this kind of instruction. And later, what are the consequences given to him from the Creator? You can explore it if you read the Quran. Okay. So it's a kind of religious responsibility. This responsibility does not come from any government, does not come from any political parties. Okay. Now, when it will be collected, it will be collected or it will be paid by the people who are eligible or who are on which it is applicable. They will, and they can either follow the Gregorian calendar or they can follow the lunar calendar. Which one has more number of days? Gregorian calendar.
Sir.
Okay, Gregorian calendar has more number of days. In that case, if you pay zakat considering the lunar year, in total you will be paying more. Or if you consider Gregorian calendar and to pay Zakat, in total you will be paying more. In which case you will be paying more?
Sir, Gregorian calendar, we will pay less. Lunar calendar, we will pay more.
Exactly. Administered by government or non-profit making private institutions. Okay. So in Muslim countries, there is Zakat is administered by government. So government collects the Zakat from the people who are eligible for paying it, and government centrally distributes it to the people who are eligible for getting it. And in our country, government cannot administer, or government does not have central collection of Zakat or distribution of Zakat. Some non-profit making private institutions are engaged in collecting Zakat and disbursing Zakat. So one of those institutions in our country is Center for Zakat Management. And in our country, government has a practice, Bangladesh government Zakat Fund. So if you deposit your Zakat contribution to that account, you will get tax exemption. You will get a tax rebate, which is more appropriate. But if you contribute Zakat personally, in that case, you cannot enjoy this tax rebate. So these are some issues. Okay, next. In Muslim countries, it is often common that they have some, they solely rely on the Zakat. So they do not impose income taxes separately. They do not impose income tax separately in Muslim countries, in some Muslim countries. So you'll see that they do not charge taxes. So some Muslim countries have become preferred by people for living because there is no income taxes to be paid there. So what is the reason? Because Zakat works or Zakat serves the purpose of income tax. But remember, Zakat is not equal to income tax. You already have got the difference. Zakat is based on wealth. Income tax is based on income. There is a significant difference between the definition of income and the definition of wealth. One is flow variable, another one is stock variable. And Zakat account which are administered by government or other non-profit entities, they require some annual audit. And now the issue of disbursement. So what I mentioned here, sometimes it works as a substitute, sometimes it works as a complement. In our country, you can consider the Zakat as a complement to our secular taxation. But in some countries, which I mentioned earlier, that they do not charge taxes separately, rather they collect the Zakat centrally and they disburse it well to implement the Zakat policies fully. Okay, disbursement. To whom Zakat can be paid? The simple answer is poor and needy. But if you look at this, the question is who are poor and who are needy? There are specific number of fields in which Zakat can be paid. Zakat cannot be paid to all. There are clear restrictions and identification of the parties who are eligible to receive the Zakat. Okay. So who are eligible to receive the Zakat? Let me give you a brief identification of the parties who are permissible. So this is one party, poor and needy. So this poor, what is the definition of poor? The definition of poor is that they do not have adequate amount of wealth which is necessary for their livelihood. And needy is a person who is trying to earn his livelihood, but his earnings is not sufficient to make his or her livelihood. So the distinction between poor and needy is a gray area, and some poor and needy persons declare them that they are poor, and some do not declare them they are poor. And in another definition, if the person does not have nisab amount of wealth, that person is poor. Can you recall what I mentioned about the nisab? Can anyone please mention that what you understood by the concept of nisab?
Yes, sir. That's 7.5 buri gold annually.
Yeah.
If we have,
Hmm.
if anyone has,
Hmm.
then he has the nisab amount of wealth.
Okay. Okay, so you have got the first, the primary definition, that who are eligible to receive the zakat. And who are also eligible to receive the zakat, the administration. So there is an administrative body who is responsible for collecting and disbursing zakat. The administration is also eligible to receive the zakat amount. Okay. And zakat can also be paid to the person who is not Muslim, who is non-Muslim, but you are paying zakat to that person, believing that if the zakat is paid to that non-Muslim person, he will be convinced to accept the Islam as religion. Zakat can be paid to the person you want to make free from, you want to make him free. In that case, zakat can be paid to him. Okay. Next one is someone is indebted, someone is close to a defaulter, and he or she wants to relieve from the loan or credit. His or her liability is greater than the asset. In that case, you can pay zakat to him. And again, zakat can also be paid for the purpose of public expenditure. So public expenditure means that that expenditure is required for all people living in the country, and that will be helpful for the greater benefit. And traveler, sometimes traveler becomes poor for a certain time because of spending all the resources, or for any incident. In that case, for that time, zakat can be paid to that person. Okay. So zakat cannot be paid to some person or some institution. So other than the person which I mentioned in last few moments, zakat cannot be paid to other person. Okay. Another thing, zakat cannot be given for implementing the expenditure of mosque. Okay, this is critical. Okay, now how can zakat be paid? Earlier, zakat was paid using in kind during the preliminary time of Islam, using food or accommodation facility. Nowadays, we have promissory note, which is a cash. You can use the cash, you can use the food, or you can use the accommodation voucher, or you can use the zakat smart card for paying zakat. Zakat smart card is an idea like the conventional smart card, which is a kind of you insert the zakat amount to the card, and the person who is receiving the zakat, he will spend money from that smart card, and he's actually disbursing, or he's actually spending the zakat contribution he has received from the zakat contributors. Okay. There is a danger that some people who receive zakat, they grow a habit that they do not need income, or they do not need to engage in some activities to earn income. And this kind of dependency culture is a kind of negative effect which is caused by this kind of distribution through zakat. Okay, but it is not a big problem. It can be solved in alternative way. Okay. Now, next one, endowment or waqf in religious term. Anyone familiar with the waqf?
Yes, sir. ওয়াকফ করে দেওয়া মানে দান করে দেওয়া।
Okay. So, for what purposes?
স্যার পারপাসটা হলো, স্যার পারপাসটা তো জানি না, যেমন কেউ কেউ জায়গা মসজিদের জন্য ওয়াকফ করে দিল বা মাদ্রাসার জন্য।
Yeah.
A charity, one kind of charity.
Yeah. So it's a kind of charity, and it is not a kind of mandatory requirement, but your purpose is to make sure that your society is getting benefit, or you are trying to ensure the wealth transfer to the people who need it. Okay, or who need this. And this is done by the people who have a greater amount of wealth and who have greater amount of resources. And what they do, they gift out or they donate some of their properties in the form of cash or land or buildings. And though it is similar to traditional endowment, but when we are in Islamic finance, we are somewhat restricted by the Sharia that what we can do with the waqf and what we cannot do. So endowment is a conventional concept. When in that case, you need to follow, when it is endowment, you need to follow the country act applicable for the endowment. But when it is waqf, you need to follow the Sharia compliance first. So usually the Waqf in Sharia is done to support the administration of a mosque or the madrasa. Okay. So the terms and conditions given in Sharia for the Waqf are like it is irrevocable. So once it is donated or gifted out, one cannot claim that I will take it back. And the donor can specify some conditions with some purposes for which his donation will be used or will be utilized. And donor cannot be a person as a financial beneficiary from the Waqf property. And a trust is managed or a trust is established for the purpose of looking after of this Waqf property. So for looking after the Waqf property, a trust is established. And the life of trust is perpetual. And this trust can be established in the name of founder. Okay. So there's no restriction that you cannot give your name in the trust, or you cannot give your name in the Waqf as a founder. Okay. So Waqf is managed by trust, which is a third party, and you have employed it to look after this. And who is appointing? The trust is appointed by founder, but the purpose of the trustee is to make sure that this purpose is achieved. The specified purpose is achieved. But how the dependents of the founder will enjoy the right on the trust will be specifically mentioned. And trustee, other than managing the Waqf assets, they also make sure that they are working as a Sharia board. So the issue is that they need to check that they are complying with the Sharia. And if the Waqf is for the purpose of establishment is mosque, there will be some questions which need to be addressed by the trustee. These are some questions which will be determined or which will be solved by the trustee. Okay. So whether the mosque imam, how much the salary of the mosque imam and how the imam will be selected. These are the some issues which need to be solved by the trustee who is managing the Waqf. And based on the legal status, there is a separate entity for trust according to the legal status. So trust by its name can make decision, can make complaint, can sue against another party. And the legal requirement is kind of, there will be a requirement of annual audit of the trust income and the expenditures of using the, for the purpose of using the Waqf property. And earlier Waqf properties are not changed or are not used for the purpose of generating income, but nowadays Waqf concept is modernized for expanding the Waqf property. So one way is that you can use the Waqf property for these purposes of mosque, and you can also provide use the Waqf property for this purpose, and you can also lease part of the Waqf property to generate income. So this is permissible, leasing. For what purpose? For generating income. And you can also provide some commercial use of the Waqf property for the purpose of generating income for the management of the Waqf property. So what happens that in practice that Waqf property is being sold by the heirs of the founder nowadays. You will see that mosque properties are being sold. It was not actually mosque property, it was actually the Waqf property. So who has sold? The legal heirs has sold out the portion of the Waqf property. So it is not permissible. You can lease out a part only for this purpose. So you see that Waqf property cannot be used for financial benefits of the donors. But what is happening? The heirs of the donors are nowadays selling the Waqf properties and taking out the income from the Waqf property for their own financial benefits. So that are kind of things happening nowadays. During 1990s, what happened in some Muslim countries, government nationalized all Waqf properties. There is some reason, but what happened is that the state intervened and government has taken out the right of the Waqf properties during that time. It happened in a number of Muslim countries. And we'd like to look at the Islamic microfinance now. Note that who are the clients of the microfinance? The person who does not get the services from the banks or formal system. So microfinance is not an informal system. Informal system means the there is a practice of giving loan by some businessmen individually or some lenders individually. There is a kind of informal financing. And formal financing is the financing made by the banking or in financing institutions. And microfinance is in between these two. It is not formal, it is not informal. Microfinance is kind of semi-formal. And I already have mentioned who are the clients of this microfinance, the person who are excluded from where? Excluded from the from taking service of financial formal banking system or formal financial institution. So they usually have low income, they usually do not have any asset, and they even do not have any cash to have a bank account. You know that for taking loan from a conventional bank, you need to have a bank account, you need to have some balance, and then you'll be eligible to apply for loan, and your loan amount will be credited to your bank account. So they are not these people. I mean the people who take services from microfinance. Now the question is, what are the challenges of microfinance? Because they work with small advances, that's why their administration cost is very high. And they do not claim any collateral. They do not claim any collateral. Note that these are the some common practices in conventional microfinance and Islamic microfinance. And because of the okay, as I mentioned that only the marginalized people who do not have the access from the formal finance to the formal financial system, they are eligible for getting the financing from the microfinance institutions. Okay, and microfinance serve a greater number of clients who have a very low amount of actual no amount of wealth or no amount of cash, and administrating them their credit, the cost of servicing their credit is very high. That's why they are charged high, and they also charge no collateral, and they charge high percentage when they charge return from them. Okay, so what are the financing products of the Islamic microfinance? That is the big question here. Can you recall the financing products of the Islamic finance? Would you please mention some products? Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you please mention some of the financing products we learned in the lecture 3? No response from any of you.
No, sir.
You can't recall any financing product.
So lecture 3, we discussed actually about the credit cards, Murabaha,
Yeah.
Tawarruk,
Yeah.
Ijara,
Right.
Musharaka, Salam, and Istisna.
Right, exactly. So these are the some Islamic finance products. Okay. So Islamic microfinance do not have different products, but they have the similar products which is offered by the Islamic banks, but they charge high and they provide the similar products to the marginalized people. Have you got the idea of the Islamic microfinance products? Okay. And there are some exceptions that which will not be applicable to the Islamic microfinance, but usually the products are similar, which are offered by the Islamic banks. Okay. And there is another product, but it is not a profit-making product, which is a kind of Qard Hasan, which is provided without charging any interest or without charging any return or any profit from the from the borrowers. Okay. So how it happens, it is a kind of charity making initiative. Okay. Then credit union is a kind of the conventional credit union, but I mean the participants join in the credit union, they make deposits, and only the person only the member of the credit union is eligible to take the loan, and the loan will be obviously interest free, as it is part of Islamic finance, and it must be repaid as a contractually agreed. Okay. So how the credit union can survive when they charge no profit, they take no return from their members? So sometimes they can depend on the subsidies provided by NGOs. They can take the help from the Islamic charities. And if the members of the credit union is very credit worthy, your monitoring cost becomes lower. Okay. And you see that the members of the credit union are also part of a society. So there is a social pressure to make the repayment on time. Okay. And sometimes concessional finance is also available in the Islamic finance, which is also for the purpose of social benefit. And it happens because of the availability of subsidy, which reduces the financing cost. But if you are familiar with the conventional finance theories, you would learn that when subsidy is provided, there is a greater chance that resources will be misallocated. And the individual who has greater potential to take the loan will find it costly, and the person who is less potential to take the credit, he will find the financing very cheap. So over time, it turns out that the person who are more potential, they will not be interested to take the loan, because they will find that the subsidized rate the rate applicable for them is high for them. Okay. So it discourages the people who are more potential. And we started with the social benefits and social welfare, and conventional taxation should take what kind of directions to ensure the social justice. So there are some form of taxes, and it is the general sales tax, value-added tax. These are some consumption taxes and part of the indirect taxes. But you see that compared to progressive income tax, which is kind of high income people will pay more taxes, low income people will pay less taxes. Compared to this is less equitable. Which one? The indirect taxes. Because regardless of the income and wealth level, when you are consuming some product on which GST is applicable or VAT is applicable, you will be responsible to pay for it. And you will also see the presence of wealth and inheritance tax, and that will ensure the social justice in a form, because by taking money from these wealthy people in the form of taxes, this money will be spent out for the marginalized people. And from the Islamic perspective, these things need to be ensured. The taxes treatment should be fair and the purpose of the taxation should be such that you are actually taking out property from the rich people and spending the property for the purpose of the poor people, so that you bring some redistribution of income and wealth. And what I mentioned, that which areas should be prioritized by the government for the purpose of ensuring social welfare, and what is the reality? The reality is that government always spends a significant amount of money for these purposes. military, policing, judicial expenditure for the purpose of maintaining security and law and order. And they also spend more money for the infrastructure, which comes second. But the priority should be more for spending money for education, health, and social services, which is expected to bring more social welfare, serve more poor people, and bring more good redistribution of wealth and more equitable distribution of wealth in the society. Okay. And I mentioned that I will just highlight some international development assistance or international development organization which provides financial assistance to the Muslim countries. So one of those is Islamic Development Bank, and they serve OIC member countries, and they support establishment of school, hospital, and infrastructure. And they also collaborate with some conventional development agencies, which are World Bank, ADB, then African Development Bank. And they also, in addition to provide financing facilities, they also work for dissemination of knowledge of Sharia practices and Sharia financing products and Sharia compliant other financing mechanisms to the people of Muslim countries. Okay. So we like to conclude here by saying that Zakat and Waqf are the two big things in the Islamic social finance, but they cannot play an expected role to ensure the social welfare unless government provides adequate support to make these things more operable and to make the things more Sharia compliant. So that is all about for today's class.